If you want to gain full control of your rendered output in LightWave, one thing that you can do is render out separate passes. Basically what I mean by that is you could, let's go ahead and do an F9 render so we can get a render here. You could take this image and you could break out see the specularity, the speck hit that's going on the surface of the skin, and say the shadow, and let's say the reflection in the eyes. If you wanted to, you could break those out to separate images, separate passes, and take it into a compositing program like After Effects or Digital Fusion or even Photoshop, and bring those images back together and then further refine them and gain ultimate control. This is common practice in the industry, and one way to go about breaking out your images into different passes in LightWave is to use a tool called Render Buffer Export. So I thought we could take a look at that. So here's our image here. You don't really need to go ahead and have a render, but I thought we could use this to take a look. So to set up separate passes, I'm going to hit Control F8 to open up the processing tab, and we're going to add an image filter, and we're going to choose Render Buffer Export. Okay, we're going to do one of these per pass. So I'm going to double click on Buffer Export, and let's say that for the first pass that we want to do, a very common one would be to do a shadow pass. Okay, we need to choose the image type, and I like to work with PNGs, so I'm just going to pick PNG 24. I could pick 32-bit, but I'll just pick 24 for this. And then we need to give it a base name. So we're doing shadow. Just want to double check. Yeah, we're doing shadow. I already forgotten that amount of time. Shadow, and I'll hit save. And it goes ahead and uses my content directory that I've got set up. Okay, so with that set up, I can close that. And why don't we go ahead and set up a couple of them, and I'm just going to copy and paste. That way I don't have to set up the PNG or anything like that. Double click, and instead of shadow, let's choose another really common one is a depth pass. Okay, that allows us to go in and change depth of field and add fog and all kind of stuff in a compositing package. So we'll set depth. Okay, and I just want to change my base name, depth. You can get as creative as you want with the names. Okay, so this one is going to be depth. And let's do one more. We'll come back and do a couple more. So I'm going to paste another one. And for this one, let's do, well, you know what? I'm going to use specular so we can see the difference between specular and specular shaded. So, or actually we'll come back to those and do those at the same time. So one more, let's do raw RGB. Okay, that's another one that we can use that's useful, RGB, for my file base name. Okay, so we've got those three. Now the interesting thing about buffer export, render buffer export, is that you don't have to do an F10. If you do an F9, it will save off these images as well. So I'm going to go ahead and let's do an F9 render. Okay. So what it did was it did my basic render, but then it also, over in my folder here, created my depth pass. Okay, so you can see it becomes more white, a higher value, the farther away it gets. So it's dark here, close to the tip of the nose here, and then it fades off to white. So, and you can even see down here it's getting a little ghosted, almost like there's fog in the scene. Well, that's our depth pass. Our raw RGB, there's no shading. There's no diffuse shading, there's no specularity, there's no reflection in the eyes, there's just nothing. It's just raw RGB data. And I'm going to go ahead and choose the next one, shadow. So it's just our shadow pass. Okay, so we can control, in a compositing package or in a post-process package like Photoshop or After Effects or Fusion or something like that, you could go in and tweak just your shadows by breaking this out. You could tweak just, say, the depth of field by working with this. Okay, so I'm just going to move that off to the side, and let's do a couple more just so we get a full understanding. So I'm going to copy and paste, and this is one that brings up a lot of confusion, so I think it'd be a good one to show. I'm going to choose specular, and I'm going to change the base name to spec, and then I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to choose shaded specular. Okay, two completely different things. So we need to know the difference here. Shade spec. Okay, and that'll work. And while we're here, actually, let's just focus on that, and we'll come back and do a couple more. So let me do another render. Okay, let me bring this over here. Okay, so let's look at our spec. Well, wait a minute. Look at the spec. Let's see if we can compare it here. Well, there's my spec hit. Okay, but this is my spec pass. Well, specular, when you choose specular, you're actually choosing the amount of specularity, the amount of spec. So this is, if it's, you know, say that's like, I don't know, 60, 80%, well, that's showing that that's what that pass is. If you want the actual spec hit, you need shaded specular. So now, right here, you can see we're actually getting where the specularity is. You can see it on the feet and the hands and the belly and the eyes and around the nose. Okay, just like you can see in this image. So depending on what you want, usually in most cases you're really looking for the shaded specular right here. Okay, so let's do just a couple more, and then I think we'll have a pretty good grasp on this. So I'm going to paste, come down here, and I'm going to choose, let's choose shaded reflection. Okay, and let's change the name to reflect. Save, and I'm going to do a render. Okay, and let's bring this over here and take a look at our reflection. Now it's small here, so I'm actually going to double click to open that up, and then I'm going to zoom in just so we can see what we got. So the only thing in this pass is what's being reflected, and I've just got this image with some trees and a lake, and I think Matt's in this image as well. So yeah, right here wearing the blue shirt. So so we've got this, we've got just the reflection. The only thing that's reflecting in this image are his eyes, are the character's eyes. So we've got that broken out, so we can control. Say we do the render and we're like, you know, I think we need a little less reflection. Well, we can tone that down in a compositing package, and we don't have to go and re-render. So that would be a benefit to breaking this out into passes. So you have all of these. Different options here: luminosity, diffuse, you know, shadow, depth, and you can also save it out in any image format that you'd like here. Okay, so this is just a quick way to break out your renders into various passes, and then bring them into, I keep saying a compositing package, but I think of Photoshop as a compositing package for still images. So you could go into Photoshop and use these different passes to fully tweak and refine your renders. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction to render buffer export.